The 1920s in America roared with a vibrancy that seemed destined to last. It was an era of unprecedented economic growth, fueled by technological innovation and a surge in consumer spending. Automobiles, radios, and telephones, once considered luxuries, became commonplace. Jazz music filled the airwaves, flappers danced the Charleston, and a sense of boundless optimism permeated society. The stock market soared to dizzying heights as investors eagerly poured their savings into what seemed like a surefire path to riches. From bustling cities to rural farmlands, Americans embraced a newfound prosperity. The wounds of World War I were healing, and a wave of consumerism swept the nation. Installment plans made it easier than ever to purchase the latest gadgets and appliances. Farmers, buoyed by wartime demand, increased production, unaware of the looming agricultural surplus that would soon shatter their dreams. Yet beneath the surface of this glittering decade, cracks were beginning to appear. Income inequality widened, leaving many Americans struggling to make ends meet. Farmers, burdened by debt and falling crop prices, faced an increasingly precarious existence. The stock market, once a symbol of endless prosperity, was becoming increasingly speculative, fueled by borrowed money and inflated expectations. The seeds of economic disaster were being sown, even as the band played on. The Roaring Twenties, with its intoxicating blend of exuberance and excess, would prove to be a fleeting moment in American history. It was a time of great promise and even greater peril. A time when the seeds of both unparalleled prosperity and devastating hardship were sown. As the decade drew to a close, the party would soon be over, and the nation would face its greatest challenge yet. October 29, 1929. A date etched in history, Black Tuesday. On this fateful day, the stock market, which had been teetering on the brink for weeks, finally succumbed to the weight of its own excesses. The speculative bubble that had fueled the Roaring Twenties burst, sending shockwaves across the globe. The day began with a sense of growing panic as investors, gripped by fear and uncertainty, rushed to sell their shares at any price. As selling intensified, stock prices plummeted, wiping out fortunes in the blink of an eye. The ticker tape, unable to keep pace with the volume of trades, ran hours behind, adding to the chaos and confusion. By the end of the day, over 16 million shares had changed hands, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average had plunged by nearly 13%. The collapse of the stock market signaled the beginning of the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis in modern history. Black Tuesday was more than just a financial crash, it was a national trauma. It shattered the illusion of endless prosperity and exposed the underlying weaknesses of the American economy. The dreams of millions were dashed as fortunes were wiped out, businesses went bankrupt, and unemployment soared. The immediate aftermath of the stock market crash was swift and devastating. Businesses, large and small, faced a precipitous drop in consumer demand. Factories idled, production lines ground to a halt, and workers were laid off in droves. The unemployment rate, which had hovered around 3% in 1929, skyrocketed to nearly 25% by 1933. Banks, burdened by bad loans and dwindling deposits, began to fail at an alarming rate. Panicked depositors rushed to withdraw their savings, only to find that the bank's doors were closed. The collapse of the banking system further constricted credit, making it nearly impossible for businesses to obtain the loans they desperately needed to survive. Across the nation, families struggled to cope with the harsh realities of the Depression. Bread lines stretched for blocks, soup kitchens were overwhelmed, and homelessness became a visible reminder of the nation's plight. Farmers, already burdened by debt and falling crop prices, faced foreclosure and eviction. Many were forced to abandon their land and seek work in already overcrowded cities. The American dream, once so tantalizingly within reach, seemed to evaporate overnight. The Great Depression had begun its relentless grip on the nation, leaving an indelible mark on the lives of millions. As if the economic hardships of the Great Depression weren't enough, A natural disaster of epic proportions struck the American heartland. The Dust Bowl, a period of severe dust storms that ravaged the Great Plains during the 1930s, compounded the misery of the Depression, transforming once fertile farmland into an arid wasteland. Years of intensive farming practices coupled with a prolonged drought had left the topsoil vulnerable to the relentless winds that swept across the region. Massive dust storms, often referred to as black blizzards, darkened the skies, turning day into night. The dust infiltrated homes, businesses, and even the lungs of those unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. Millions of acres of farmland were rendered useless, forcing countless farm families to abandon their homes and livelihoods. The exodus of these Okies and Arkies, as they were often called, westward in search of work and a better life became a defining image of the Depression era. The Dust Bowl was a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of nature and human activity. It highlighted the fragility of the environment and the devastating consequences of its exploitation. For those caught in its path, the Dust Bowl was a story of resilience, loss, and the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship.